Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Consider us, please.
No.
Right here. Thank you so much. Oh, just your mom. And he requires you to make sure we have legit sources to have their contact information.
Go ahead. Let me welcome everyone to this session. This is what I call historical lab. This is not yet for public consumption. We are trying to collect data about the black presence in Alachua County. And so on behalf of the Alachua County African and African American Historical Society, I want to thank you for coming and welcome to this session. There are a few things we have to leave out this morning because of technology. For example, the recorded speech of the keynote speaker, Dr. Marvin Dunn. We cannot play it for you because it's just not going to work through this new technology we have here. But we are going to record the voices of people who have stories to tell about the organizations. And so I'm going to skip introducing the speaker, and then I'm going to ask Dr. David Canton. He's the director of the African American Studies program at the University of Florida, to make some remarks before we begin. Dr. Canton, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. As you know, I'm the director of the African American Studies program at the University of Florida. And for the last few months, I've been very busy with the AP African American Studies course denial by the Florida Department of Education, SB 999, and really trying to ensure that we become a department. So really, organizations like these demonstrating the work of why African history is so important, African history is so important to the state of Florida, United States, and the world, is what we're trying to do in our program. We currently are hiring 2 faculty this year, and it's been a challenge trying to convince them that, you can come here and do your work, which is, it's very complicated. But, for us, we're still teaching our classes, still signing the same books, doing the same pedagogy, until I get a direct message that says, if you want to keep your job, do not assign this book. But like teachers of the past, people taught Woodson underneath the table, right? If I have to do that, I'll do that, right? So again, this is nothing new, the attack on African American studies. I mean, African studies has been on attack for the last 50 years, and for the last 50 years, we've been successful in terms of, rebuking that attack. So with your support, with my support, I can give this organization, we can do this together to ensure that African Studies is institutionalized, and more importantly, it's out there for K through 12 students. You don't know how many students come to UF. This is the first time I heard of X, heard of Y, heard of Z, and it's unfortunate that it's not until they go to college. So think of all the students that don't go to college, that their knowledge stops at high school. That's a very scary thought. And many politicians take advantage of that ignorance, which we're seeing currently in 2023. So what the work you're doing is very important. Dr. Gore and I, we talk all the time, and definitely when we have programs, look for y'all to come through our programs, show us that support as we will become a department in spite of what's going on in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our honorary chair is on her way back in Africa. You don't start a meeting until the elders comes in, but we are here in America. She has given me permission for us to proceed. Whenever she gets here at age 105, we will welcome her as our honorary chair of the meeting. But I would like an introduction to be recorded about the keynote speaker by Phyllis Erney, who is a member of our board of directors. Phyllis, can you say a few things about her to be recorded, about Dr. Dunn, please?
Okay, so I am Phyllis Erney, and I'm a member of this committee. But I would say when I was introduced to Dr. Marvin Dunn by way of learning about him for our presentation today, I start with this. I have been reading. I've had to do a lot of history catching up in my lifetime, which is probably for the last 5 years or so. I'm kind of a late starter. But right now, I happen to be reading Devil in the Grove by Gilbert King, and I just keep being amazed and amazed and amazed at the history that I never learned, that I am going to make up for. I try to, in any case. But it related so much to what I now learn about Marvin Dunn. I would introduce, I bet many of you know of him, and I did not, but I'm so glad that I do now. He was born and raised in Florida. He is Professor Emeritus from Florida International. He retired in 2006, his chair. He has a BA in psychology from Morehouse. He has a master's in education administration from Roosevelt University, and he has a PhD from the University of Tennessee. In addition to his education work, his history is that he was also in the military. He served as a naval officer on the USS Kitty Hawk and other carriers. His research really appealed to me as well when I learned that his primary interest has been identification of effective instructional and behavioral strategies for programs for students at risk. And I come from a school background here in Alachua County, so that's very important to me as a special ed teacher that I was, and then a school counselor. He's done a lot of community work, you can imagine, community service and international service, especially in South Africa over time. And lastly, I just want to point out maybe books that you already know of, but I did not, that is going on my reading list. He's the author of the following books: The History of Florida Through Black Eyes, Black Miami in the 20th Century, which I think I'm understanding is now he appears in, and we can see on Amazon Prime, the documentary version of that book, if I'm correct. He's also produced 3 documentary films: Rosewood Uncovered, The Murder on the Swanee, William James Howard story, and Black Seminoles in the Bahamas. And I note that he also wrote a book about the Kingsleys and the Kingsley Plantation, and that was, I know of it, but now I want to know more, now that I understand what the history of that is all about. So I think that's my introduction to Marvin Dunn, and I wish he were here for us to meet.
Well, I'm Dr. Marvin Dunn. I was born in Florida, in Volusia County, in 1940. I'm old enough to have had to sit in the back of the bus. I am old enough to have gone to segregated schools in Florida. I'm old enough to have had to enter white people's homes through the back door. My parents, my dad was a migrant worker. He took us, the whole family, on the migrant trail to work as migrants in New York, picking potatoes in the summer. After 3 years of doing that, by 1951, my father was able to purchase a home in Miami. These homes were available to Black veterans. And so we moved to Miami in 1951 when I was 11 years old. I finished high school early. Went to Morehouse College out of the 11th grade. This was 1957. I was on a Greyhound bus heading to Atlanta to go to college. My parents had put me on this bus that Sunday night on the back seat and gave me a little brown bag lunch and said to me, don't you move off this back seat until this bus gets to Atlanta tomorrow afternoon. And the bus takes off Sunday night. And by the time the bus got to Fort Lauderdale, I moved to the middle of the bus and rode the rest of it. It felt better somehow. It felt better sitting in the middle of that bus, but white people were getting on that bus and sitting behind me now. By the next morning, there was a group of white, we were now in Waycross, Georgia, heading to Atlanta. And a group of white high school kids got on that bus. And a white girl sat down next to me. They were chattering, sat down right next to me. You could hear a pin drop on that bus when that child sat down next to me. I had never been that close to a white person. And finally, one of the white men behind me said, nigga, get up. You know you don't belong up there. Get back where you belong. And there were black people in the back seat who were sort of nodding in. Come on, you need to move. And a white Marine in uniform, a corporal, stood up and asked, why are you all bothering him? He's not bothering. Why are you all on him? And once that man started defending me, they forgot about me. You must be a nigger lover. You must be a Jew. You must come from the north. You don't understand how we do things here. So the bus driver, we're now outside of Waycross, pulls the bus over at a gas station. He walks back to where I'm sitting. He points his finger at me and says, you were creating a disturbance in this bus. I'm putting you off. And that man gave me my little cardboard suitcase and put me off at that gas station and said, wait for the next Greyhound bus to Atlanta, which came by in about 3 hours. And I took that bus and went on to Atlanta. I will leave it to you to guess where I sat when I got on that bus in Waycross. I took my behind to that back seat that my mom and dad had told me and rode over to Atlanta. But that was a very frightening experience for me. I was by myself. I was 16 years old, going to college, never been away from home by myself. And then to be accosted on this bus was just an unbelievable experience. In any case, I completed Morehouse College in 1961, and I joined the Navy. I wanted to be a naval officer. It's a long story behind that, but in the process of trying to become an officer, I had some difficulty just getting through the, let me just say what happened. I joined the Navy. I was interested in going to officer candidate school. You had to have a college degree to do that. And I was inducted in Jacksonville. I went to Jacksonville on a bus with a bunch of white recruits. I was the only college graduate. So they put me in charge of this group. And we went to Jacksonville to the induction center from Miami on a bus. We get to the induction center around closing time. And the 12 white guys who were with me, they called them up, each one came up, and they gave them a paper that let them go across the street to the White Hotel at the Navy's expense to stay until the next morning and come back. When they were all gone, they called me up. And they gave me, they call them chips, to go to a colored hotel across the railroad track. I protested, but you know, we're closing the office, take it up tomorrow. So I walk across the railroad track and I go to this place that really was a house of prostitution. It was a rundown place, people drunk on the porch. I went into the kitchen to be given dinner, and there were roaches and flies in the food, so I didn't eat dinner. I went up to my bed and I had bed bugs. You could see them crawling in the seams of the pillow. So I didn't sleep. I sat up all night. The next morning I went down for breakfast in the same nasty kitchen, so I didn't have breakfast. So I went back to the induction center, back across the railroad track, and took the exam for officer candidate school, and I failed. The petty officer, who was sort of over the process, called me up almost gleefully. He said, "You're the one that's going to OCS, become an officer, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "No, you're not. You failed the test. You're going to go to Great Lakes with the rest of these dummies you brought in here." And they put me on an airplane with the rest of these guys, and they flew me to Great Lakes, Illinois. I was a seaman recruit. Before I left, I said, "I really would like to make a written complaint about this." So they called an officer in, and they asked me what happened, and I told him. He said, "Jacob," he said to me, That's where Donna Washington stays when she comes to town. There's Louis Armstrong used to stay. Nobody's complained about this before. So I said, put it in writing, and I did. And they put me on a plane, and I went with the rest of them to Great Lakes. And near the end of my training, this limousine pulls up with a flag on it. It was a base commander's car, and sent over to get me. I was taken to the base commander's office. I go in, and he had the letter that I'd written in Jacksonville in his hand. And he said, you complained about the test in Jacksonville. The Navy's going to give you another opportunity to take the officer candidate school test in the morning, which I did, and I passed. And with that, I was able to go on to officer candidate school and become an officer in the Navy. I spent 6 years as an officer. I was on aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers, incidentally, can take about 5,000 men on board to run those ships. About 1,300 of those men are officers. Guess how many Black officers were on the 2 carriers that I served on? Just me. That was a very lonely experience. Being number one, being the first one is overrated, because often you end up isolated. When my fellow officers would hit the beach to go on, and nobody would say, Marvin, hey, come on, go with us. They left me behind on the ship. They didn't really know how to handle me. I got along better with the stewards and cooks than with anybody. They knew what I liked, and I got along much better with them. I got out of the Navy. I loved being in the Navy. I was on the bridge of these aircraft carriers. At age 9, I was crawling in the dirt, picking potatoes on Long Island, New York. And by age 25, I was driving an aircraft carrier in the Pacific Ocean. So people say things haven't changed. No, that's not true. Things have changed, not enough. In any case, the Navy had, when I was in the Navy, had 0.004% Black officers on ships. Virtually invisible Black officers. They had Black doctors and Black lawyers and Black supply officers, but not on fighting ships. That was very, very rare. So in June of 1963, our carrier, I was on the carrier Kitty Hawk, operating off San Diego, got the message that President Kennedy was going to visit our ship and stay overnight. You should have seen the Navy go crazy. All the practicing we did to be ready for the president, the jets flying over, the submarines coming up, the missiles going off, we practiced for a month for Kennedy's arrival on the ship. He was to arrive at noon. They were bringing him out by helicopter from San Diego. The ship was about 200 miles out to sea. And they put me on the bridge when Kennedy was going to be on the bridge, which I thought, that's where I'll get to see the president. I was very excited about that. But Kennedy was late. He was late. And my watch was over. And their watch is over. I was on 3 other officers, and my time on the bridge was over. So as you leave the bridge, you say to the captain, permission to leave the bridge, sir, what the other 3 officers did. And I go up to the captain and ask permission to leave the bridge. And he said, no, Lieutenant, you will remain on the bridge. I didn't have anything to do. They wanted me on that bridge when Kennedy came up. And sure enough, the president comes on the bridge. This is June of '63, sits in the captain's chair in agony. You could tell the man his back, as you may know, was a problem for Kennedy, injuries during the war. So you could tell that he was very, very uncomfortable. His doctor was with him. He was sitting in the captain's chair, bringing one admiral after another general, and all these people coming up to meet the president. He was hardly paying attention. And I was standing maybe 10 feet from Kennedy. And just for a few seconds, our eyes locked. And I'd never seen such deep, blue, painful eyes. I didn't speak to him, he didn't speak to me, but in those 3 or 4 seconds that we looked into each other's eyes, I had the feeling that he and I were the only ones who did not want to be on that bridge. But that's why I got out of the Navy. I felt the Navy was using me, and the Kennedy incident was the reason I really decided to go into psychology and get out of the Navy. So I was on another aircraft carrier by this time, operating in the Mediterranean. And I sent an application to enter the psychology doctoral program at the University of Florida in Gainesville. I wanted to get my doctorate from my home university. So I sent out my application to Gainesville, and about 2 or 3 months later, I get a letter. I think I have it someplace still. Dear Lieutenant Dunn, the University of Florida does not accept Negroes in its graduate program in psychology. However, the state of Florida will pay your tuition at any institution outside of Florida to which you may be admitted. Here I was in uniform, serving my country on a warship, and Florida writes me back and says, you can't come here. Now, that was 1966. Incidentally, let me just to close out the Kennedy. That incident was in June of '63. In November, he was dead. So that gives a time frame for the president's visitation. In any case, I had also applied to the University of Tennessee, and I was accepted. Full ride, no tuition. We paid everything that I had to have in terms of tuition and what have you at that institution. So today, when the University of Florida and the University of Tennessee play anything, I root for Tennessee. When I finished at Tennessee, I came back home to Florida, to Miami. I became a school psychologist for about 2 years. I couldn't stand it. I worked in Black schools. My job was giving IQ tests to Black kids, and it was a miserable job because the tests were not fair to these kids, and it affected where they could go in school. Let me give you one example. One question on the IQ test you ask a kid, what is the thing to do if your mother sent you to the store to get a loaf of bread and the grocer told you he didn't have any? Now, if the child says, I will go to another store, you get 3 points for that. Or, some other answer, you get 2 points. Black kids that I asked that question to, almost all of them gave the same answer. I'll go back home and tell my mama. My mother wanted me just wandering around the neighborhood trying to find a loaf of bread. I send you someplace, you go there, you come back. So Black kids were losing points for giving an answer that was culturally correct for them. And then other examples of giving these tests made me feel that I really did not want to do this. And I moved more towards active community psychology, taking on projects in the community that I thought needed to be addressed. Among the things I started to do was to put gardens in the inner city on vacant lots with students. My students were they were in a state university, had no idea about the Black community, would never go into Liberty City overtime because they were frightened. Most of my students were Hispanic. So I would take them on, I gave them the opportunity on weekends. They could choose, they could come to overtown to the gardens, we were just planting gardens alongside the expressway. I didn't ask. We just started putting them in. And vacant lots that were used for drug, we just started planting on them. And our students had a choice. You could come to the community gardens and work for 3 weekends during the term, or you could give me a term paper of 50 pages or more. So over the course of doing that 10 years, I think I had 3 kids do the paper, and they were all pregnant. I was able to bring kids from FIU into Overtown, clearing up lots, putting in gardens. We first started planting a botanical garden, this community more beautiful. There was not a speck of grass in Overtown. You didn't find grass. Concrete, rock, you didn't find grass. So we started putting in botanical plants. And one morning we had about 50 students out there working, and some guys half drunk by 10 o'clock in the morning on the other side of the street leaning against a pole. Hey, why don't y'all put in something we can eat? I thought, that's not a bad idea. So we started planting collard greens and lettuce and carrots and potatoes and all kinds of things in an open field, no fence. And people didn't bother that stuff. That garden was so beautiful that it was where the police took breaks. They just drive up and just park, and just use that space for what it was intended. So I did that over a number of years. And then when the 1980 riot happened in Miami, that's another story. My interest turned to Black history. because I found in preparing a book about that riot that there was very little Black history about Miami. I was trying to explain what happened in 1980 and why this event was so painful and difficult for the community, but there was very little Black history. So I moved to write a book about the history of Blacks in Miami. That book is entitled Black Miami in the 20th Century. It is the only comprehensive book about the presence of Blacks in Miami that exists today. It cannot be taken into a Dade County school today. If a teacher has that book in her or his classroom, they need to get it out, because that book discusses institutional racism in Miami. It talks about how every institution, the police, the economy, political, even religious, every institution was racialized in Florida, in Miami. And I say that in that book. And I point out to incidents of racial violence and such. So that book now with the new DeSantis Stop Woke Act mess cannot be safely brought into a classroom. Hold on. My next venture in terms of writing was a book on the history of violence, racial violence in Florida. That book is a history of Florida through Black eyes. So I started in the 1990s, late 90s, going around Florida to places where racial violence had taken place on a large scale. And that took me to all kinds of locations in Florida, including eventually to Rosewood, where the 1923 massacre took place. In 2008, I and a white guy partner purchased 5 acres of land in Rosewood, pristine land, untouched since 1923. It's gorgeous. Rosewood today is a rural community, gentrified, 5-acre lots, all white. And I'm the only Black person today who owns land in Rosewood. I went to Rosewood, I think the first time in 1997. I was on a conference in Gainesville. Rosewood is directly west of Gainesville. If you all know that, most folks don't know that. But that Sunday, I drove out to, I went, where is this Rosewood place? I drive west on Highway 24. Eventually, about 45 minutes or so, I see a sign, Rosewood. Nothing ever but a Baptist church and the J.W. White house. Mr. White and his wife were the ones who protected Blacks during the event, and their house still stands in Rosewood. So that Sunday, I make the first left turn I could make onto this clay road, and it ended at a cul-de-sac. And I get out and I look through the woods and I see this green tunnel coming through the woods, and I realized that that was the railroad track that the train used to evacuate people during the massacre. So I started walking down this railroad track, and I see a graveyard, I see tombstones. I wander over there and I found the Black cemetery. It's now my private property. I was trespassing. I was just trespassing. And now it was getting dark, it started to drizzle, getting rainy. And I started back to my car and I got scared. I realized I was out there by myself, and something had happened to me that was just, no one could ever know what happened to me. I got frightened when I was with that first time, rushed back to my car. But the scene, the tunnel stayed with me. So some years later, 2008, I found a piece of property that had a part of that railroad still intact. The rails were gone, but the railroad bed was still there. And I and my partner purchased those 5 acres in 2008. My reason for doing it was just to preserve those 5 acres so that this now gentrified, all white Rosewood community would have at least one spot where Rosewood was preserved as it was when this massacre happened. Now I'm taking groups of students up to Rosewood. Our second trip is this coming weekend. I now take what we're calling Teach the Truth tours to these places I've studied and documented where these things happen. These tours consists of a 56-passenger busload of kids. Each child has the high school student who travels with a parent or a grandparent. And we take them, all expenses paid. All expenses paid. Only the grown folks have to buy their food. But we take them to an overnight trip to Rosewood or to some other place. Well, Rosewood is always on the stop, but there are other places in addition to Rosewood that this tour goes to. Ocoee, for example, Live Oak, for example. But we end up in Rosewood all the time. So that's the purpose of the tours, is to have kids with their parent or grandparent walk that budded ground. And when we did this for the first time this past January, right there for the 100th recognition of the Rosewood event, now I took a busload of kids up there with parents and grandparents. Others were on the bus as well, but most of them were parents with kids with parents or grandparents. They cried. You know, just to be able to walk on that railroad track, people were moved to tears. So the question becomes, well, now, is that bad? You know, if people standing there wiping tears, is that, no, it's not bad. Bloody history ought to make you feel bad, ought to make you feel sad. Shouldn't make you feel angry. Shouldn't try to blame somebody else for what happened 100 years ago. But the emotional experience of walking on land where the blood was shed, where the ancestors suffered, brings a connection somehow to a lot of people, not just the Black folks who are out there. So we're going to continue those tours. We're going to be doing them with higher institutions of higher education, including the University of Florida, eventually, we hope. And that's my path going forward. I'll stop talking now because I probably took up most of the time we had set aside for this.
This is great. Now, can you just tell us a little bit more about the significance of all you have done in Black history and our plan for this roundtable to document the Black presence in Alachua County?
The importance of it?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
The significance, yeah.
Oh, the significance of it is that it's dangerously at risk of being lost. Listen, the kinds of things that I documented, the lynching of 15-year-old Willie James Howard in 1944 in Live Oak for writing a love letter to a girl. That boy was buried, lynched at the girl's father and two other men, buried in an unmarked grave and forgotten for 4 decades. These efforts on my part are intended to save this history, because our history, our violent history, is the easiest part to be lost because a lot of folks do not want to confront that reality, that history.
Thank you. What would be your advice to us just trying now to document our history in Alachua County?
What do I advise?
Yes.
I think it's time for activism. I really do. I think it's time to do more than just, well, let's all go out and vote. I think we need to have public demonstrations that what is happening in Florida to education is absolutely unacceptable. And if we try to do that from our desks at home, I'm not sure that's going to be that effective. I think people need to see us in the streets peacefully, organized peacefully, whites, Black, Jews, all of us saying this is not right. So I guess that's my view is let's get out in the street peacefully and demand change in Florida.
Thank you so much. If you have any additional comments you want to make for us before we leave?
Just a couple of things about it. I don't know, I haven't delved that much into Alachua County history, but you had some mentions there too. And one of the problems that you had in Alachua County after the Civil War was that so many Black Union soldiers mustered out of the army in Alachua County, which you all know, I'm telling you, through history, which you know. But the fact that there were so many Union Black soldiers in Alachua County was one of the reasons that your county was one of the most stable counties during Reconstruction. You had Black people in power who could offer some protection that was not available to other counties, Blacks in other counties at that time. So I've already appreciated that about Alachua County. They always had a good, strong Black presence since the Civil War.
Let me call your attention to part of what we have been doing as Historical Society. Behind you, you see 3 posters. And more than 12 research assistants at the University of Florida. They are interns. They are looking into, we started with census, how black folks got here, 15th century. And we went into institutions. Everything you see there is done by those kids at the poster, but the documents are in our file as a part of what's going to become the history of black folks in Alachua County. What we are doing today is a part of that process of collecting data to document our history. And so, to begin, I want the honorable folks at this roundtable to just identify themselves, and immediately after that, they will be called upon to tell the story of the organizations.
Okay. I'm Vivian Filer with the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center.
I'm Lizzie Jenkins, founder, president of the Real Rosewood Foundation.
I'm Carolyn Cosby Edwards, and I'm with the Pleasant Street Historical Society.
Good morning. I'm Carl Smart. I'm with the Alachua County.
I'm Caitlin Hoff-Mahoney, and I'm the Executive Director of the Matheson History Museum.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Wilson, and I'm with the Star Center Theater.
Good morning. I'm John Nix. I'm with the North Central Florida Black Farmers Association.
Hi, I'm Carol Richardson. I'm a Cultural Affairs Manager for the City of Gainesville, and I'm also representing the A. Quinn Jones Museum and Cultural Center.
By the way, Carol made it possible for us to be here. We will thank her later on at the end of the program. Now, I don't have any other presentation, but if there's anyone here who has a prior appointment that would not make it to be with us for the rest of the session, I want to start with that. Is anybody here who has to leave in the next hour? All right, so you begin then.
Thank you. Good morning again. It's my pleasure to be here. I am a fourth generation black farmer. My great-grandparents originated and started the farming part of the farming industry in East Alachua County. We're from the Rochelle, Florida area. I'm presently running our family farm. It's a 80-acre farm. I basically do grass-fed beef cattle. My family basically were row croppers. They basically did all the typical vegetables that we had in the Central Florida area: the peas, the corn, the sweet potatoes, all of those things. And we leased land outside of our farm for our cattle industry. At that time, Owens, Illinois, Georgia Pacific, and now Weyerhaeuser had all the basically pine land that they leased out to farmers to run cattle, and these were called woods cattle. So I grew up in that industry. I learned a lot being a farmer and learned a lot working the land. One of the things that was always taught to me was that you needed to get an education because that's something they can't take from you. You needed to get some dirt. So farmers were looked at very high, not because of their education, but because of their independence. And that was one thing that led a lot of blacks to go into farming, because you could raise your own food and you could have your own land. So that area of Alachua County had a lot of farmers, a lot of people that farmed because they could have their own land. I recently attended a conference, and in my conversation with some of the members, I'm an engineer by profession. I'm an agricultural mechanical engineer, and I attend a lot of engineering conferences, and I currently work with the Alachua County Schools. And I'm always encouraging them to learn their history in our schools. You were just mentioning about kids coming into university without understanding their history. So we're very much asking our kids to learn their history. So one of the things that I talked about at the conference was black farms and what I learned from being a part of a black farm and growing up in a black farm, and how that led to my ability to do leadership. One of the things working in a cattle farm that you learn is that animals are larger than you. So you cannot make them do anything that they don't want to do. The same thing with presenting to people and leading people. You can't make people do what they don't want to do. So my grandfather taught me 3 things on the farm. When we're working cattle, you can't chase them because they're larger and they're faster than you. So you have to go around them. When you're talking with people and people have a different way of thinking than you do, then you have to listen, and then you have to go around them and give them another viewpoint once they have finished. Don't argue, don't chase. Second item that I learned there was that sometimes you always have to stay focused. When we're bringing cattle in and we're coming into gates, there's sometimes that one's going to break the bunch and leave and try to leave. My grandparents always told me, he said, stay the course, hold the bunch, let them go. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes you can't convince everybody of what your point is. So sometimes you have to stay focused and hold the bunch. And lastly, he told me sometimes when we're bringing cattle into gates, you have to let them find their own way. Don't rush them. When we're working with people, a lot of times people learn differently. So you have to let people find their own way to your point. And you have to be patient and let people find their own way. So I want to say that black farmers were the history of black farmers was out of survival. We had to have our own food. We had to have our own land. And I'm really proud that the Black Farmers Association, the North Central Florida Black Farmers Association, was created. And what we do is we support each other. We tend to find the strong points from each other and then join together so that we can support each other on things like providing fencing, providing hay, providing all the vegetables, finding out, we have a list of what each farmer provides, and then we work with each other to make sure and support each other. One of our main goals right now is setting up our website and making sure that on that website, everything that each farmer provides is listed on that website. Secondly, we've had several information sessions from USDA, NRCS, Natural Conservation Service, and the Farm Service Agencies. These are agencies that provide funding. In the past, black farmers have been left out because they did not get the funding that they needed. And when they got funding, they didn't get the proper funding to make them sustain. It was just enough to keep them going. So right now we're making sure that any money that's available, we understand where it is, how it is, what paperwork we need to fill out such that we can get the funding necessary and to sustain our farms. Our main objective right now is to keep the land. We don't want to lose the land. Right now, there's so much development going on in Alachua County that a lot of the agricultural land is being lost. So we want to make sure we keep the land. As I mentioned earlier, and I see my cousin Magnolia Jackson here, the Jacksons, the Halls, all of us are from the Rochelle area. Magnolia is my cousin. She is my grandmother's niece. So we're a very strong family, the Bradleys and the Halls, and we believe in keeping our land. I work very hard to make sure that our 80 acres are taken care of and pass that love for the land on to that next generation. So I think that that's important. We have to let our kids know how important agriculture is, how important keeping the land is. And in order to keep the land, we got to be profitable. And in order to be profitable, we need to be able to take advantage of all the programs that's available. And that was how we lost our land. Some statistics is black farms have moved from 15% of all the land in the United States down to 2% now. And at one time, we about 100 years ago, we peaked in about 1920. That was when we had 15% of all the land in the United States. Again, now we're down to 2%. We had about 950,000 black farmers across 950,000 black farmers across the United States. Now we're down to about 300,000 black farmers. So acreage-wise, we have shrinked. We had the great movement from the South to the North after about 1930. Everybody kind of moved and started leaving and going up into the big cities. And a lot of the family farms got lost at that time. So we want to make sure that what's left is taken care of. And we have to do that by making sure that the next generation understands the value of keeping the land. And that's one of the things that the North Central Black Farmers Association is doing also. We're talking with the youth. We're telling the youth about the land. And one good thing, I was talking with people, now food is becoming a health thing. Everybody wants healthy food. Therefore, things like grass-fed beef, things like raising your own vegetables, these are things that we want to be able to market to our community, making sure that food sovereignty is a important thing. And during COVID, you saw a lot of times the shelves were kind of empty. So it's very important now that people are learning to grow their own food. And we want to particularly let our black family, our black kids and our black community understand that agriculture is not slavery. Agriculture is a way in which we were able to be independent. So a lot of people moved away and don't want to get into agriculture because they associate it with slavery. But we are trying to change that thought to independence. Food is very important. If we can raise our own food, and not only raise our own food, but raise healthy food for our community and learn how to do this. There's a upscale there's an upscale now of people moving into urban gardens. And black farmers have been very instrumental in teaching kids on how to do gardening. One of the programs that I work with at Alachua County Schools is putting a garden in every school and teaching the kids how to do that. And I'm bringing some of the black farmers in to show the kids how to grow things. So as far as the North Central Florida black farmers, We're out there. I want you to start looking for us on our website. We're going to be advertising all the things that each individual person sells, and we're going to be out in the community showing people how to grow things. So that's our story. We're just getting started, but we're looking for a great future. And I'm very proud to call myself a black farmer.
Thank you very much. At this point, let me introduce our honorary chair. She has just come in. Evie, could you introduce?
Bring her up front.
Mag, bring her to the front so we can honor her and see her and love her. Come over here.
Come up here. Okay.
And face the camera.
Okay.
Now you can introduce her.
Okay. This is such an honor to be here with everyone. Thank you all for having myself. I'm Everetta Edwards. My family is from Hawthorne, Florida. I am the descendant of a farmer. His name was Ernest Nelson. This is my great aunt. She is the baby sister of my grandmother, Idella. Magnolia Bradley Jackson will be turning 105 years old in 10 days. Yes. She is a retired principal. She spent over 40 years in the Alachua County school system, and she was instrumental in ensuring that all the members of her family acquired a higher education. We are celebrating her legacy and her life with a gala on March 18th. And I am proud to announce that I have confirmed the attendance and participation of Bethune-Cookman University's Inspirational Gospel Choir. They will be performing. And this will be a gospel celebration. Aunt Mag, she has a strong faith in God and loves music of inspiration. So it will be a party to celebrate her life and her love for music. I'm also honored to say that our new mayor, Mayor Harvey Ward Jr., will be presenting Ms. Jackson with a proclamation on Tuesday, March 14th at 1 o'clock. We want to invite the entire community to come and witness this historic moment. It's not every day you see a 105-year-old wildcat. Yeah, she is a wildcat. So, and Ms. Chestnut was at our last event at City Hall, so I'm happy that she's here and able for us to celebrate her still. Ms. Jackson, would you like to say something?
Nothing but good morning.
She did not know what we were coming to.
I've been here before, but so good I had to come back again.
Okay. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much, darling. We love you. Thank you.
Our cousin, Mr. Mix, and thank you for that introduction as well.
And the party will be.
Oh,
the party will be held at.
The party will be held at.
She already knows the answer.
Okay, the party will be held at the Historic
Museum
and Cultural Center. So my mother actually attended. My mother's Benny Edwards. They're all everybody's from here. She actually attended an event for FAMU at the Cotton Club, and she called me while she was there, and she said, "This is where we're having Magnolia's party."
Yeah, okay.
And so we're looking forward to that.
I would like to add that I am a relative of
Miss Magnolia.
I am a relative too of Miss Magnolia. My grandfather, Charlie Brown, in 1868 was born in Rochelle on his birth certificate. Yes, small world.
Yeah.
And he always would ride his horse from Archer to see his relatives in Rosewood.
Oh, in Rosewood.
Not Rosewood, Rochelle.
Rochelle. Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate you. Yeah.
What beautiful history. Beautiful history.
Now I'm going to ask our commissioner to speak next because I know she has another very important obligation at home. So, Dr. Chestnut, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Here, the camera will be on you. You want to move a little bit. Get the camera.
Okay. I'm going to just, they said we could bring pictures, so.
Come at it, Daddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did bring a poster there.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jake. I'm going to talk about the Chestnut Funeral Home, and I want to start with our founder. I know you do. The story everyone talks about is that his hair turned snow white at age 16.
Yes.
And it was from then on white. Okay, the Chestnuts family story began in early 1800s, South Carolina. Johnson Chestnut was born into slavery in Camden, South Carolina around 1828. He became a carpenter and furniture maker and was an enslaved laborer to the Hale family. Some of his beautiful pieces can still be seen at the Hale farm homestead. Johnson moved to Alachua County with the Hale family and his fellow enslaved laborers in 1854. At some point, he married Maria, and they had 3 sons, John, Lawrence, and James. After the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War, Johnson moved his family to Gainesville. He became involved in the local community, setting a precedent that his descendants carry on today. Johnson served on the Gainesville City Commission from 1868 to 1869 and was a founding trustee of Union Academy. Lawrence Chestnut married Louisa Kendrick, also of Camden, South Carolina. He worked in a printing office and, like his father, was involved in local politics and was the trustee of Union Academy. Louisa lived to be 100 years old and lived in the Pleasant Street community until her death in 1952. And if you go down to the public library, you may see this picture. This is Louisa Chestnut, and she is the great-grandmother to Charles Chestnut III. This is Charles Chestnut III, seated here. That's my husband. That's my husband, yes. Charles Chestnut Sr., one of Lawrence and Louisa's children, married Hattie, and they had 1 son, Charles Chestnut Jr. Okay, so it's like going to school in the show and tell. Yeah. All right, this is Charles Chestnut Jr. He was a handsome lad.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. After serving an apprenticeship at the Williams Thomas Funeral Home, right here, he opened the Hughes and Chestnut Funeral Home. That's Charles Chestnut Sr. did that. In 1914, with his partner, Matthew Hughes, it was among one of the first licensed in the state of Florida. In 1924, Chestnut and Hughes were also founding members of the Florida Morticians Association, an organization for black morticians. Union Academy continued to be at the center of the family's education, and Charles Sr. was very involved. His dedication to Gainesville's African-American community is evident in the fact that the auditorium at Lincoln High School was named for him. I'm not sure it still is. Charles Jr. joined the family business. Sadly, he died unexpectedly in 1959. At that time, his son, Charles III, my husband, was a sophomore at Bethune-Cookman. University, but he married a rattler. And in order to take over the funeral business, he left school and enrolled at the Eccles School of Mortuary Science in Philadelphia. Founders Charles Chestnut Sr. and Matthew E. Hughes took their roles as funeral directors to heart, knowing that their business placed them in a role of leadership within the local African American community. They ran their business by the code of good funeral practice, and that is this: as funeral directors, and I quote, "As funeral directors, our calling imposes upon us special responsibilities to those we serve and to the public at large. Chief among them is the obligation to inform the public so that everyone can make knowledgeable decisions about funerals and funeral direction." Chestnut and Hughes, Charles Chestnut Sr. then went on to train 14 other African American funeral directors in Florida. So, one thing that Charles Chestnut Sr. instilled was a lifelong love of community in his family, and the Chestnut family has been dedicated to public service, having served on the City Commission, County Commission, School Board, and the Florida Legislature. Thank you.
I remember Mr. Chestnut with his white hair and his dog. Crossing the avenue.
And always stood out and waved.
Yes,
Always the kindest man. Yes.
He had, that dog lost his eye, and he had one made for him that
Okay. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Cynthia, the Chestnuts, like you said, were community-oriented, community-involved. They also established a burial club.
Oh, yes.
And I have a letter wherein, I have a copy of a letter wherein my aunt, my Rosewood aunt, was a member of that burial club. I will share it with you. I'll make you a copy.
Please do.
Terrific.
Please do. And you know, his grandmother was from Cedar Key, Hattie Chestnut.
Exactly, and Hattie Wares, one day, that's Charles' grandmother, maternal. Charles said to me, he said, "Liz, do you know that my grandmother is a Rosewood descendant?" I said, "No." I researched it. I have that information. Small world, y'all. Yes, he is.
Yes, it is. It's great.
Dr. J, can I share because I'm going to have to go back. And the reason I can't stay is I have a caretaker at home, and so my time is limited. But I think one of the questions was, what are the challenges that your business faces? And I'd like to just share that. Sure. And then, thank you. The challenge for us is a lack of industry in our community, which results in lower earnings in the community, which results in affordability for services. An exodus of talent. All of our young people leave here. My son, Carl's son, they don't see this as a viable community to stay in, and that is something that I think we need to really seriously address. So it is quite a challenge for all of us. And we have to really work with local government in terms of getting them to see why it is so important what businesses we bring to town. Gainesville seems to be for biotech, and that may not be what is the road for our children. And so we end up losing them. We don't have the jobs here. They can't afford the services. Our community is growing, but it's growing with students and retirees. And
well.
Yes. Well, but at least you came back home, so we appreciate it. We appreciate it. But our people don't have jobs with benefits. They don't have insurance, and when the jobs they don't have, the jobs they don't have provide a livable wage. There is no discretionary income for the services we provide. We are in a crisis in Gainesville, and we are worried about the trajectory of our consumer base, concerned about our future if things don't change. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Is that we're going to have time for discussion? I really want to go through the round table, so we take 10 minutes to make your presentation. Is anybody in a hurry to leave? Who wants to be next? Or since we talk about the city, is anybody who's a worker in the city here?
I'll be glad to talk about the city because I work for the county. Just kidding. That's right. I grew up working for the city. That's right. I'm Carl Smart. I'm Deputy County Manager, and I'm really here to talk about the Alachua County Community Remembrance Project and how it fits into the community and how it's looking at African American history in this area. And so I'm very excited to be a part of that project. I was sitting on the dais and substituting for the county manager when the discussion was held about Old Joe, the Confederate statue that stood on the northwest corner of the county administration property for over 100 years, folks, and there were people on both sides of that issue speaking for and against removing Old Joe. And probably, well, no doubt, there was more people speaking in favor of keeping Old Joe than there were in favor of removing Old Joe. And so I was a little concerned, very, very much concerned. But you saw a lot of racism, you saw a lot of racist talk happen during that discussion at the County Commission. But in the end, the County Commission voted to remove Old Joe, saying that doesn't reflect, our community today. It does not reflect our community today. In fact, we are appalled that it stayed standing that long in our community. So Old Joe was removed and given back to its owners, the Daughters of the Confederate. And so Old Joe now resides out in the country somewhere on their property, and so he's happy and we're happy too. It was a win-win, So anyway, out of that, the county started to do a Truth and Reconciliation program, and what can we do to bring people back together? What can we do to help to identify the truth, the history that happened back during that time, and then move toward reconciliation, making amends. How do we make amends for what has happened historically, and how African American community was treated by the overall community, by the majority community. So the county decided to start a community remembrance project, and wouldn't you know it, Chestnut would be the leader. Chuck Chestnut, Commissioner Chuck Chestnut was commissioned as the leader of the community remembrance project, and I was asked to serve as a liaison with EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative out of Montgomery, and I served along with Jackie Davis and with Dr. Deidre Houchin, and the three of us are kind of liaisons with EJI. EJI, you probably already know, they have the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Justice and Peace, and I'm sure a number of you have gone to Montgomery. Have you? Okay. If you haven't, then that's a trip you want to take. You certainly want to take, because they've done a lot to memorialize what happened, primarily looking at the years after Reconstruction, 1877 through 1950, and a lot of the lynchings that occurred. Brian Stevenson, who's an African-American lawyer, who is the head of Equal Justice Initiative. He finished Harvard Law School, and he decided he wasn't going to work for a corporation and make big money. He was going to start a nonprofit and help deal with people who were on death row, primarily, who didn't have legal representation or underrepresentation. And so that was what he decided to do. And he started the Equal Justice Initiative, and it has grown. And one of their projects is the Community Remembrance Project. What we've done working with Commissioner Chestnut is to help work with identify leaders in different communities around. A number of them are here. We work with the Manioka Gordon Lake Cross neighborhood, Ayoka Sowala and Nisawala. They have formed a subcommittee that actually have already done soil collection and gotten that done. And you're looking at now doing a historical marker that will mark the space out there that will memorialize what happened in that area. The key with soil collections is you collect the soil from lynching sites. When EJI was doing their research, they identified over 4,400 people who were lynched without going through a trial. They're called extrajudicial, meaning they did not have the benefit of a trial or a finding, a judgment, finding of guilty or not guilty. They were, most of the time, they were just taken out of the jail by mobs and then taken and hanged in the community. And many times left hanging there so that people can come from miles away and see what they had done. It served as clearly as intimidation to the rest of the community, to the black community. And we've had a number of lynchings in this area. We've counted thus far about 46 that we can document that were done without proper process of trial and decision. And so Manioka, but also Micanopy. I see Melanie Barr is here. We've had Alachua and Newtonsville. And Newtonsville was that city prior to Alachua. And if you look at the history of Newtonsville, you'll see that was a predominantly black community that was thriving in that area just north of Alachua. There's a Newtonsville cemetery out there now still, and there's a plan we've already ordered, and it has been delivered to. It was delivered just the other day, and historical marker that will be erected in that area, Alachua, Newtonsville. High Springs is working toward the same thing. Newberry, with the Newberry 6, when there were 6 victims that were killed, black Americans that were killed without benefit of trial, and in the Newberry area back in 1916, I believe it was. And so there's been soil collections there, a marker done in Newberry. We're still working with Archer and Miss Lizzie Jenkins here with the Rosewood Project. Gainesville has already done soil collections, marker, and essays. Hawthorne, Waldo, Rochelle, Campville. Mr. Nix was there for part of that ceremony. So it really is an exciting project. We are learning a lot about what happened back during that time. And with the soil collections and the markers, we also decided to participate in essays. And we work with ninth graders, high schoolers, 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders to do essays about African American history, about the Community Remembrance Project, and then relate that to what's happening now. You know, a lot of the things that are happening in our communities now, in our state as well as in our nation, that impact the African American community. And the essays were wonderful. scholarships were given by EJI, by Equal Justice Initiative, and so a lot of the students benefited with monetary scholarships, and so it really has been a great project. We will continue the work. Like I said, Alachua and Newtonsville will be doing a historical marker soon. We'll also be doing one down in Micanopy with Commissioner Gianna Williams and Melanie Barr and those, and also working with the city of Archer in High Springs. So it's an exciting project, and we're going to continue to do that work. The real challenge is going to be the reconciliation part now. We've done a lot of work on truth. The research was there. We've done the research, and we've been able to bring forward a lot of the truth, and it really has been encouraging that folks have been accepting of it, accepting of the soil collections, accepting of the historical markers in their community. There's a marker right on the west side of the county administration building that talks about the lynchings, that documents the lynchings that occurred here in Alachua County. The challenge is going to be the reconciliation piece. Is now what do we do in order to make amends? What can we do as a community to help to rectify and all the wrongs that were done? And it's going to have to do with working with our youth, our young people, with our schools. You mentioned education and soil. All of that is part of it. Dealing with the issue of food insecurity, Leah, dealing with equity, dealing with economic development and jobs. All those things are part of that reconciliation process that we need to move into and get folks committed and involved in those processes. So that's pretty much the project, sir. Thank you, Dr. Jake.
Thank you. So while we are on government, let me go to the city government.
Hello, good morning. I'm Carol Richardson again with A. Quinn Jones Museum. Just to tell you a little bit about A. Quinn Jones and why this museum existed. Back in 1921, at the urging of the then president of Florida A&M College, Mr. Nathan Young, he knew of A. Quinn Jones, who was a student who had excelled at Florida A&M College. Today it's called Florida A&M University. And so there was this school in Gainesville, Florida that was housing prominent people, educating prominent people, and that school was Union Academy that Commissioner Chestnut alluded to. Union Academy is actually on the grounds of where we are today. So this Rosa B. Williams Center was originally Union Academy. So Mr. Young encouraged A. Quinn Jones, who was a principal in the Pensacola area, to come to Gainesville. They're doing some great things in their local government, in their local education. So he came to become the principal here at Union in 1921. While here, the Board of Trustees as well as the community members decided that they were going to build a new school for African Americans, and Union Academy would no longer exist. And that school was the Lincoln High School, which is currently on Northwest 7th Avenue. So A. Quinn Jones, then he and his wife purchased a home in the Pleasant Street, Fifth Avenue district, which is also on 7th Avenue. And that home is currently the museum. He lived in that home for 57 years. The entire time that he taught at Lincoln High School, even when he retired, he still lived in that home until his death. When he passed away, there were a group of community members that felt that there was something that we could do to really honor him. So his son, Mr. Oliver Jones, along with Aaron Young, the late Dr. Patricia Hill-Nunn, Joe Buchanan, and a few other community members decided they wanted to do something special to honor the legacy of A. Quinn Jones. So they donated the home to Greater Bethel AME Church, where Mr. Jones attended church. Well, the church inherited the home, and they're like, okay, well, what are we going to do with it? So then the church gave the home to Oliver Jones Fraternity, which was Alpha Phi Alpha. Alpha Phi Alpha accepted it and then said, okay, what are we going to do with it? So because it was old, it had a lot of repair and because it was in a historic neighborhood, there's rules to restoring historic homes. So Oliver Jones, Joel Buchanan, and a group of community members petitioned the city of Gainesville to perhaps take the home. And so first thing that had to happen is they had to get the home on a national registry. So community members, I believe Mallory O'Connor, Kathleen Pagan, a few people got together with the Jones family to get the house on the national registry. So that happened in 2009, and then the house just sat. So at the urging of community members and the then city commissioners, Sherwin Henry, Charles Golston, they decided we're going to do something with this house. So through the CRA money at the time, well, GCRA money, they renovated the house to turn it into an honor of Mr. Jones. And so the house opened as a museum in 2017. And again, what are we going to do with it? Now that the GCRA has invested all this money to renovate it, so they hired a coordinator, which was Commissioner Desmond Duncan Walker was the first coordinator, and she created a couple exhibitions in the museum. One was called The Power of Education, Civil Rights in Gainesville, and the Prominent Places of Churches. So those are permanent exhibitions that we have, and then Commissioner Walker now becomes a commissioner. So then I was hired as the new coordinator, and what our goal now with the museum is for it to be a public place of education, a public place for community, and a public place to honor culture from Africa as well as the diaspora. So we've had programs in there that talks about the history of Haiti, the history of the Africans. We've had artists from Ethiopia. We have African American book talks. We celebrate Kwanzaa. We're really a smorgasbord, but we're very small, so there's only so much that we could do. We highlight our beautiful patio where we do live music. We have jazz, R&B. We have a blues society. But one of the things we're trying to look at, what is the role of museums in preserving African American history and culture? And museums are changing. So we're really, really excited through investments with the City of Gainesville's commission. We are creating an augmented reality museum. So if you come to Aquin Jones and you walk 7th Avenue, our museum will come alive on your cell phone. It will take you through each room. And we're working with the Aquin Jones students at the Aquin Jones Center to teach them coding and to teach them history and to really open just African American culture and history for the city of Gainesville. And this is all I'm really, really excited of the community, the education, the school board, and the city's commitment to preserving the history of Aquin Jones and the legacy of the community. Thank you.
Give it to Jake and then.
Thank you so much, Carol. We really appreciate that. Is there anyone else who wants to go next? Maybe let's get an artist here. We can't do anything about Black history without art. I'll come back to you. I just saw it.
My name is Carolyn Cosby Edwards, and the reason I wanted to go next was that I am a microcosm, an individual cell of probably all of the things that have been talked about up to this point. My family, and I'll get to the organization in a minute, my family was one of those African American families that came in wagons from Camden, South Carolina in the 1860s. And we have, thanks to me, continued to live here up until the present. Cynthia talked about retirees. I am technically a retiree, but I did grow up in Gainesville in the Pleasant Street area, and since moving back, become the next generation to live here. But my connection is a personal connection and a family history. I have been doing that individually, but I see so many connections from my family to Pleasant Street, even to Rochelle, where my grandmother taught back in the 1930s. So, you know, all these things are just fitting together, and I'm here really as a student. I know you have your official students from the University of Florida, but I am a community student. I'm a retired educator at the high school and college level, and I taught, among other things, African American studies, so there's a connection there. I went to the University of Florida. There's a connection there. I'm a journalist. So I just feel like all of these things are serendipitously, I can't even say that word, coming together, so I'm glad to be here. Officially, I'm representing today the Pleasant Street Historic Society. I'm new to that organization, so I have to say that in deference to those who have been a part of that organization, founding it and been here for years. But I just feel like I am Pleasant Street, so I feel like that this is a neighborhood that I grew up in and that I want to see flourish. A lot of the things that Cynthia Chestnut said are actually true. I sit in my house and I say that we are, you know, that I'm a continuous generation, you know, from the 1870s. Our house was originally built in the 1870s. It unfortunately burned down, but my sisters and I were determined to rebuild that house. But I sit and I look at and see empty homes and empty lots, and it's all because, and I was one of them, all because the children, when they grew up, left, you know, for opportunities in the north or even as close as Atlanta or Jacksonville or Miami. You know, we left. I came back, but you know, I am a retiree, so I can definitely relate to that. So I say that I come as a Pleasant Street representative, and it's in my blood. It's in the soil that you know that I'm now living on, and a lot of the houses were in that area were originally built by my family members. Those with surround porches. My family, the Merles, were in the construction industry as builders. We always were emphasizing education and family. So my family history is a Pleasant Street family history. The organization itself was actually, I was not a part of it at that time, but is actually formed in 1984 and has done a number of promotional and informational activities through the years, and has obtained another connection, a historic family home, the home of Clarnell Smith Griffin, sorry, and going through some of the processes that the A.Q. Jones Museum is going through, but we're at the very early stages of trying to renovate the building, and of course, being a historical district, it you know, it's difficult, and the fundraising and the cost of that, and the vision of how it would be used, and I was just amazed that I was just doing some of my family history, and I kept thinking the name Smith. Well, it turns out that she is a cousin of mine as well, from, you know, historically. So I just feel connected and would like to learn and gain and perhaps contribute to the history of Alachua County, specifically right now for me, Pleasant Street area, neighborhood, and then perhaps go from there. So I just wanted to say that I'm here to make connections. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to the artist. You can't talk about Black history, African American history without the arts. Okay, here we go.
Good morning or early afternoon, I'm not sure what time it is, but I'm Rhonda Wilson, founding executive director of the Star Center Theater, founded in 2000. But even before that, started out in these arts community I guess kind of along with Miss Carol, we were, trying to make arts work in this community. And I use the vehicle of theater. I'm also an educator, a public school educator, and we use theater a lot to teach history to kids and get them involved in knowing our history. The reason I started the Star Center was because I saw the need after working in the Housing Authority one summer with some kids that they didn't have access or weren't exposed to art and what it could do. And a lot of us may see art as just entertainment, but I don't see it that way as an educator, media specialist. I know Ms. Erney. Yeah, as a media specialist, I love books, I love reading, I love literature, and you can use that to teach our history, to educate, and to expose kids. And we're not just here for entertainment. And the Star Center is really committed to doing stories and presenting stories that talk about our history. Doesn't exclude other people. It's just that I want to make sure that our kids, our families, and our community knows what our history is and that our stories matter. It may not be about Martin Luther King, but it may be about somebody in this community. And we want to make sure that we use our arts to do that. And I'm really passionate about theater as a viable part of this community. And cultural, people move to cities that are viable culturally. They don't go if there's nothing there for them to do outside of what they do every day. And I think Commissioner Chestnut mentioned about young people don't want to stay, and we have to figure out ways to make them stay. And with bringing their families here and move here, one of the things would be culture, and not just to entertain, because you can turn on your pick up that phone and be entertained all day. And I think that's the challenge with live theater, is to compete with the digital and the streaming. But there's nothing better than sitting with other people and discussing something that either you may like what you saw and you may not, but there's a discussion. And I want to make sure we drive social change through theater. We talk about different things we talk about violence in some of our plays, we talk about trafficking, and we have those discussions. And theater is an easier way to do it than to maybe sit around and just talk about it. So everybody's listening to the same thing. So I'm really a proponent. I have information about our history. We started, 23 years ago, and I'm gonna leave these for you. You wanna look at it, go to our website, come visit us, see a show. One of the challenges, of course, with arts, especially theater and things like that, is funding to keep it going. And we've been fortunate that we've nationally been able to acquire some things for the sustainability of Black theater through the Mellon Foundation, and I'm just really happy about that. And we're going to continue to do the work so we can continue to get the funding to sustain. And that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Who wants to go next? If there's no one, I will just call.
She pointed at me. So that meant me. Okay. Well, I am always excited to talk about the project that I represent. I also am excited because I'm learning as well today, and I think anytime we learn more, we can teach more and involve others at a higher level. The name of the organization that I represent is the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center. We're very proud to be here in Gainesville, and we are located at 837 Southeast 7th Avenue in Gainesville. We're on the old Sanborn map. That's the designation we have. So we're a section of town known as the Roper Edition on the Sanborn map. Before the building became known as the Cotton Club Museum, this building was a theater. It was established as the first theater for African Americans on the east side of town. I always rush to say that it didn't last then, and there still is no theater on the east side of town for anyone. So that's how much progress we've made from the time that this building was brought here in the mid-40s to now in terms of the growth of East Gainesville. The building was established as the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, and its official ribbon cutting, which marked the completion of the restoration process, was in November in 2018. And I'm going to ask Doctor, if he would just put that out front so that folks can see. Because what I want you to see is the building as we received it. And I have to say to my dear friend down there, you can't say historic buildings were renovated. They had to be restored, otherwise they are not historic anymore. I learned that in presenting grants everywhere. But anyway, I sit as the founding person, as the CEO, and as the chair of the board of directors for the Cotton Club Museum. Its history goes back to the time that my church purchased that 1.8 acres of land on the corner. And my pastor asked me as we walked past that, she said to me, she didn't ask, you know how pastors are, she said, Sister Filer, I want you to see about saving this building. Now, I was a professor of nursing. I knew about saving lives. I didn't know a thing about saving buildings. But a challenge is a challenge. And so I found the means. I partnered with a professor in the College of Building and Construction at the Powell Center, Dr. Charles Kibbert, who unfortunately was in that accident a couple years ago and died. And he was able to give us the first $5,000 grant. We used that grant to do a feasibility study to find out if the building could be saved. If you look at the picture on the corner that shows the building, it was pretty stark by then. It looked pretty bad. The kids called it the haunted house. So, you know, it wasn't looking as if it should be saved. Well, we then were very interested in finding out that, yes, the feasibility study showed that it could be saved. Why? Because, let me give you the history that brought us to that point. This building was built by the soldiers in 1940s. They cut the trees, milled the lumber, built all the buildings at Camp Blanding in Stark, Florida. So when the war ended and the government sold those buildings, you could purchase one for $1. You just had to be able to move it from its site to your site. Florida is filled with those buildings. At the University of Florida, there was a whole section designated as the Florida Village, Florida veterans. Those buildings were used for married veterans who wanted to go to college and needed a place for their families to live. Some of those barrack-type buildings, which was what Florida Village consisted of, some of those barrack-type buildings are still here. If you go on 4th Street past Depot Park, you will see some of those buildings still there. I'm really excited about that because behind, just in front of those buildings, is the porch. The last time I saw Bo Diddley alive, he was sitting on that porch talking with some of his friends, but I digress. I love, whenever I get to talk about this, I do. But the other part of this is, and I'm in good company today, when I speak, people say, well, you know she's a storyteller, which means I'm not going to stay with the facts without adding in the story. So just get ready for that. I claim it, I own it. I've been a storyteller over 60 years. So, but here's what I really want you to know about that, is this building was brought here to be used as a theater for African Americans. It became something much bigger, and the bigger thing that it became was, first of all, it was immortalizing construction that was done by soldiers in World War II. So we've celebrated Veterans Day. It became a theater that didn't exist long, but it was one of a kind, and existed on Spring Hill at the time. I grew up on Spring Hill. I came to Gainesville as I didn't grow up there. I don't have the history here. I was already an old person. I was like in the 3rd grade, but I skipped the 1st grade, so. So I've been here a few years, but the other part of that is, and I bring that history which I share, my school started in a one-room schoolhouse, but I'd love to say that because here I am from that one-room schoolhouse. But anyway, we wanted to go from finding out that this building could be saved to how we were going to go about saving it. Obviously, we know it was going to take funds. So from that, finding out it could be saved, I brought in the county commissioners and the city commissioners, and we were in this building that looked that way. I set up a long table in the center of the room covered it with a red and white checkered tablecloth. Some of you older will get the message. I had a tin tub, I filled it with drinks, and made brown paper bag lunches for the commissioners. I wanted them to have the ambiance that it took. Right in the middle in this tin roof were the holes in the roof, so it started to rain. And my friend, Dr. Mingo, put buckets down. So as it rained and I talked, you could hear drip, 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 drip. So if you can't see it, but in the corner of this building, there was a tree that started growing in the floor, and it came up through the building and out again. And I said to the commissioners, this building must be saved. It's growing its own lumber. So I don't know if it sold them, but it made the paper. But I then created a board of directors who were just as enthusiastic about saving this building as I was, some city people, the community people, and we decided we'd ask the community what they wanted. So we did focus sessions with people to come in and just eat and talk, and one of the things we learned was that the community wanted some way of seeing themselves in some economic growth. So we thought, well, if we do something, we can hire people to work at a building or business or something, that will help that part. But they also wanted something that would allow them to learn more about who they were and those kind of things. So that sounded like a museum to us. And we know the history was worth saving, so the board then decided that we would create a museum. It's so important to me, it is so important to me that when you leave this room today, I have a board member here today and she will tell you, I am just so enthusiastic about the museum portion of being who we are that it burns me to just not hear that. So I would rather you call us the museum and not the Cotton Club. If you said the museum, and I know we're not the only museum, if you say, where are you going? To the museum. What museum? Then you say what? Come on. Amen. I'm teaching to the choir, and I love that. So the Cotton Club Museum is who we are. Our vision at the museum, the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, is to enrich experiences of all who wish to grow in knowledge and appreciation of the history and culture of African-derived cultures, highlighting those in Gainesville and North Central Florida and the African American music legacy, because that's how we started. So how do we get there? Well, when we found out this building could be saved, we then wanted to go back into its history. And what we learned was a lady who we now have a documentary on, Mrs. Sarah McKnight, was an entrepreneur way before her time. She had a business on 2nd Avenue downtown, a sandwich shop. She had Sarah's Place over on 5th Avenue, where University of Florida students could come, mixed with African Americans, and they played music, the best kind of jazz and blues that they talk about still today. This is Jim Crow and segregation time, right? Yeah. So the mixing was not something you were going to see, but Mrs. Sarah McKnight was a music lover, a community worker, a woman way before her time, and certainly a brilliant person. So from those people, from those musicians, she had this small room they could come into, but she didn't have a larger space for them. So she wanted a big bands club. And her idea then in presenting that was to name this big bands club. She bought the Cotton Club from the Perriman brothers, who had the theater, and she named it for the Cotton Club in Harlem. You know, the one where Cap Calloway and Lena Horne and all of those were. I have to say that because when people are so young, I wonder what they know. And so I have to teach. I'm looking around in here, maybe a few in here that needed to know that, but anyway. I teach to the youngest, so that was it. She named it for the Cotton Club in Harlem. And her idea, and you hear some of these people talk about it, was that they could come in, the big band clubs, to this big band club and enjoy the music of the big bands who were on the Chitlin circuit. You realize they weren't going into white clubs and playing where black people could come. They were playing in white clubs, but we weren't going to be able to go and hear them. So she wanted us to have that experience. Through the doors of the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, walked or rode or drove or skated or slid. James Brown, B.B. King, Ray Charles, Bo Diddley, Brooke Benton, all of those, we have the same stage there. We have the legacy now of adding to the fact that we are historic by being built by the soldiers and the veterans, and now we add on to it the fact that we had the greatest entertainers traveling on the Chitlin circuit. You realize they had no place to live, and identification for the Chitlin circuit was that they would have a hotel that they could live in overnight, or whenever, how many nights, and then take on venues that were close around. Gainesville had a black hotel. They talk about it, it's right down the street there. It's a 2-story building behind the Gainesville Police Department, that pink building. I'm trying to get a marker there because they said Mrs. Dunbar was just as good to them as Miss Sarah was in making sure they had the right food or making sure they were comfortable. So then there was a club in Lauderdale, Florida, and one in Ocala, a club ballet, that they could go to and have this triad where they could stay a few weeks and to entertain. We called the B.B. King's office when we started, and several, to try to get old signs and flyers and all, but they said they had to travel so lightly that they could not hold on to a lot of those things, so they didn't have them to keep. So then the vision that we're living through today is the one that allows us to foster understanding of an appreciation for their African American experience and its resultant African-derived culture. Because you realize we brought it, we black people brought our culture to these shores, and that's why these shores are thriving. And I try to teach the children that black music came from Africa. A lot of the carpentry, a lot of the refined arts came from Africa. You must know that. We want to teach that. We want you to see it at the museum so you see how you fit into being not immigrant to the United States, because black people didn't immigrate to the United States, did we? We're migrants. They brought us here. Immigrant denotes that you chose to come and you can send back home and get your favorite art piece or get your culture and food in any other way. You can send back home and get that. For 450 years, we were enslaved. We weren't even allowed to know or to read or to do. So I think that education is important, and we teach that at the Canton Club Museum and Cultural Center. We also feel that if we give our visitors the best that we have, then they can take it as it is, question it, and have conversations. So a lot of what we do is work with other organizations in the city. We go beyond the entertainment level. We go into the teaching level. That's important to us. We will open up at different hours in our regular hours if there's a group that needs to come and hear about what we're doing. So some of the things that we've been very happy to do, and I also will piggyback on Commissioner Chestnut. Right now we have, and Mr. Carl here, Reverend Carl, I like to call him. We also have the exhibit of the 18 plantations that are Dr. Patricia Hill-Yannon discovered their existence in Alachua County around Gainesville. We have an exhibit. We've dedicated a room to that. And of course, the Chestnut family and the Hill family, where they came from, is in that room. It's a big piece of who we are right now, but we also are very proud to have some of the work left by Dr. Patricia Hill-Yannon, who was one of our founding members and served on the board as our curator and has now passed away. We still have some of her work. We have at least one piece left from a new artist, a young artist in Gainesville, Florida, who was Yvonne Ferguson, who is going to be going on out to California, but we're going to get her back here to do some more work for her. But we had a showing we kept for almost a year of Yvonne's work. She does these masterpiece of work. If you haven't seen them, we have one remaining. You should come and see that. But when the children came to visit, this is a big exhibit.
James Baldwin.
You did get that one? Well, I have James Baldwin she left the one with James Baldwin and Nina Simone. She left that one there. But she did Tupac or Mr. Biggie, and I didn't even know who those people were, but the children did. And they said, when they started to talk, I stopped talking because they knew so much more about it than I did. But she's an up-and-coming artist. And the beauty of what she did, because we always have a teaching piece to what we do, she worked every Saturday on a piece that she dedicated to us and left with us so the kids could watch her work and they could see themselves as artists in that way. So we have that. We have the Gullah Geechee exhibit up now, and a lot of people who will have that in their history from Sierra Leone have come to see that. It's very exciting. We had our ribbon cutting ceremony to really open the building in November of 11/18, a big extravaganza. In February of 2019. We've been up and down with COVID, but now we are just boiling with things to do. The Samuel Proctor Oral History Program has partnered with us with a lot of things. The city of Gainesville has partnered with a lot of things. I don't know if I've seen the county over there, come to think of it. We're for rent, And so but the city does it all the time. But the mayor had his State of the City address there. We earn our living in terms of how we keep going by that. I want to just say that other things that we've had is we do Juneteenth breakfast every year. We celebrate May 20th because May 20th is Florida's Emancipation Day. And we are so convinced that we must present the right history, folk. People are taking our history and bastardizing it so that the right history is not told. Whenever you change a fact, it's like my recipes. If you take my recipe and change it, it is not my recipe. Change it to your recipe. So if you take my history and change it, it's not my recipe, not my history. So what I hear then is that we have taken Juneteenth as a national holiday because it marks freedom for Black people. It does not. It marks freedom for Galveston, Texas. May 20th marks freedom. May 20th, 1865 marks freedom for Florida. May the 19th was the last Confederate state to hear the reading, but the border states around there, Delaware and those, still had enslaved people. So freedom is until the 13th Amendment was ratified in December. So I know I'm not supposed to be teaching now, so let me say a few more things because I love to teach. But I do want you to know that you can go to our website and you'll see a wide array of things. Excuse me. But so what lies ahead? Our most profound challenge was selling our dream of saving the building. We got that done. Now we are talking about saving 3 or 4 other buildings on the site. So our challenge is that the old store that was built out of wood that was of a building torn down in the 30s still stands. We want to save it and turn it into sort of an ethnic cafe. You can get a piece of potato pie and a cup of coffee and those kind of things. The stuff that we eat, the stuff that we can eat. No, nothing that's decorated with anything else, just what we brought from Africa. It's important, it's us, it's America, and we want to make sure that folk know about it. So challenge is raising funds. Challenge is now getting the school board to make sure the students are there. We get charter schools and all of those. Challenge is to make sure that the Alachua County section of the government know that we're up for rent, and that's part of our sustaining bill. And I thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you'll come visit us. We're there Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, 11 to 4, and you can go to our website and find out more, and I surely appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Can I call you Vivian? Thank you, Vivian. Now we are on the museum trip now, so let's go to the next curator here.
All right, well, I was really hoping I wasn't going to have to follow Mrs. Filer, but here we go. So again, I'm Caitlin Hoff-Mahoney. I'm the Executive Director of the Matheson History Museum. So we were incorporated as a museum in 1987. But our first building opened to the public in March of 1994, so we've got our 30th anniversary coming up next year, so we're really excited about that. Our mission is to preserve and interpret the history of Gainesville, Alachua County, and the surrounding regions. So what we do is we have 4 historic buildings that we maintain. Our main museum building, where we have our exhibits and programs, is an American Legion Hall built in the 1930s, right on University Avenue. We also have the historic Matheson House, the Tyson Tool Barn, which has a collection of historic tools, and our newest historic building we opened in 2017 in the Gainesville Gospel Tabernacle, but what you may more recently recognize it as is the Melting Pot Restaurant, which is now our library and archives. So that is one of the main things that I'm here to talk about today, is some of the research materials that we have available for African American history. So I brought with me some handouts that I put together that have a selection of some of the things that we have available. Some of the things that I'd like to highlight are the bone collection, which is not what you think it is. It is actually a photography collection from the local photographer Elmer Harvey Bone. So we have about 20,000 negatives and photographs from that photographer. And some of the things included in there are graduation photographs from Lincoln High School. There are photographs of the Mount Carmel Church. There are photographs from local community members. He did studio photography, wedding photography. It's a really rich kind of slice of life collection for Gainesville and Alachua County. So that's one of the things that we are really proud of at the museum. We also have an extensive collection of local yearbooks. We have city directories that can be used for research on businesses, properties. We have a group from the University of Florida right now working on a business history project using our collection. We have these posters here in the back of the room that Dr. Gordon worked on. Several of the students that he had working on those came and did research in our collection for those. So that is one of the things that we really have to offer is, our collections that can be used to do some research to, find some of this information. We also work frequently with the other organizations in town. We have a really good partnership with the Cotton Club Museum. I always hear Mrs. Filer's voice in the back of my head when I say that to make sure that I say it correctly. And with Carol at the A. Quinn Jones Museum. Mrs. Filer mentioned the History of the Plantations exhibit that they have at the Cotton Club Museum right now, and that is something that Dr. Kenneth Dunn had some students working with him, and they came in pretty regularly to do research in our collection for that project as well. But in addition to our research collections, we also have exhibits and programs, and that is one of the areas where we also really focus on local African American history. One of the exhibits that we have on display right now is called We're Tired of Asking, and it's about Black Thursday at the University of Florida, which was a civil rights event in 1971 where the Black Student Union went to President O'Connell's office demanding more representation and equality on campus. And then we also have public programs, and that is one of the things that I have been sitting here taking notes as everybody else has been talking, because I have heard some really interesting things that I would love to, kind of communicate with other people and see if we can get some public programming at our museum to share, some of the stories of, Lincoln High School, the Black farmers, Pleasant Street. There's just so much history here that we would love to be able to help to share with our audience as well as the wider Alachua County community. Let's see, is there anything else? So that exhibit is not currently on display physically. One of our recent exhibits was called Trailblazers, and it focused on 11 remarkable Alachua County women, one of which was Mrs. Filer. You can't have a women's history exhibit in Gainesville without including her. But the physical exhibit of that is not on display anymore, but we do have an online version of that is still available on our website. So I definitely encourage everybody to check that out. I've brought some handouts that I will leave here that have some of the research resources that I mentioned, as well as some of our recent exhibits and programs. All of our programs since September of 2020 have been recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. That has been one of the silver linings of COVID for us. So those are things that are still available if you're interested, and I encourage you to come visit us and learn more about the things that we're doing.
Thank you, thank you. Let me remind you, we got 2 more to go. We invited a lot of people. Before you leave, please make sure you register. There's a place where we can reach you, because we are going to send you the keynote speech that technology not allow us to play for you, so you can see the keynote speech. Also, on behalf of Dr. Paul Ortiz, who's now here, he's in New York, he also has a recording on the significance of his materials, oral history, to understanding African American studies. A lot of collections in oral history are in the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and he has presented about 10-15 minutes video that we are going to send to you. So make sure before you leave here, we know your email address so we can send these materials to you.
Well, it's a great honor to be able to join this outstanding event organized by my dear friend and colleague, Professor Dr. Jake Gordon. I apologize for not being able to be here in person with you today, hence this recording. Professor Gordon asked me to talk about 3 things really. One, the significance of African American studies in 2023, what lessons come out of African American studies, and also how to imagine the impact of African American studies, especially as it intersects with oral history and other disciplines. So for me as a scholar, and I've been a university professor for over 20 years now, and I was originally trained at Duke University, where I earned my PhD. I started as a field researcher for an NEH-sponsored project called Behind the Veil, documenting African American life in the Jim Crow South. And that project essentially asked us to reimagine African American history and American history from the subjective experiences and perspectives of African American elders who came of age in the Jim Crow South in roughly the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. So it was an incredible learning experience. And I'll never forget my first day of grad school at Duke, going to my research assistant assignment and being handed a page that had names on it and phone numbers. So a big part of my work as a graduate research assistant for the Behind the Veil Oral History Project was to do research on the field sites where African American elders lived, the communities, the main institutions that sustained people through the long years of Jim Crow American apartheid. And it was an eye-opening experience for a younger graduate student. And I parlayed that experience into a number of books, including my first monograph, Emancipation Betrayed. And it's important to understand, especially in the field of history, the kinds of unique contributions that African American studies has made. And so if you look at African American studies as a discipline, oral history is a very important part of African American studies. orality, oral traditions, storytelling, memory, remembrances. And this discipline, African American Studies, encompasses a lot of different perspectives, right? A lot of different methodologies. And I wanted to talk mainly about oral history because the experience that I had in interviewing African American elders in the 1990s is an experience that I have passed down to my graduate and undergraduate students today. Oral history has changed the way we think about slavery. It has changed the way we think about Reconstruction. It has certainly changed the way we think about the civil rights movement. Having the firsthand experiences of formerly enslaved African Americans as they were interviewed in the early 20th century, and by the way, we're still recovering those oral history interviews. We have many of them at the Library of Congress, but there's more work to be done. Being able to talk directly to organizers from, say, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee or the Congress of Racial Equality or the Rainbow Coalition or labor unions has been invaluable in improving and enhancing our understanding of American history and the history of the African diaspora. And so that's why I'm emphasizing oral history as a critical component of Black studies. We could easily do the same thing with literature. When we think of the great writers, Toni Morrison, Richard Wright, James Baldwin, we could easily do the same thing with geography. When we think of people like Clyde Woods or founders of Black studies like Cedric Robinson, Sylvia Wynter, Angela Davis, and so many others. What are some of the lessons learned in African American studies? Well, one of the lessons is that we need African American studies to help us understand the world we live in today. Why is the state of Florida trying to ban and censor Black studies curriculum? What is the energy behind that? What is the impetus behind that? We live in a moment when Black studies is literally under siege. But as we talked about last week, and I wanted to share with you that last week, hundreds of students from the University of Florida walked out of their classes. Thousands of students, high school students and college students across the state walked out of their classes and protested on behalf of African American studies. Now think about that for a minute. As a professor, I'm so thrilled when I learn that students are actually protesting for the right to learn more. They were protesting for the right to read Kimberly Crenshaw. The students were protesting for the right to read Roderick Ferguson. They were protesting for the right to read Robin D.G. Kelley. All of those great Black studies authors have been banned by the state of Florida and other states as well, and their names purged from the advanced placement African American studies curriculum. That's a shame, but it's a reminder that African American studies and really also African American history have been under siege and have been contested from the very beginning. African American studies is important for so many reasons, and one of the reasons is that it's one of our disciplines that comes about not because of people like me, but because of people like you, because of people like us. It's the students, the staff, and the faculty and communities that come together in places like San Francisco, California, Buffalo, New York, Syracuse, Columbus, Gainesville, Florida, so many different places in the late 60s and early 70s. And again, the image of students protesting for the right to establish an academic discipline. This is part of what makes African American studies unique, but also connected to other comparative race and ethnic studies and gender studies projects, because women's studies, gender studies, Asian American studies, Chicano studies, Latinx studies, the list goes on, all of these come about because of mass movements, protests, and especially led by first-generation college students. And why that's important is that it's really first-generation college students, even to this day, who demand of our educational institutions a sense of relevance. Where are my people's histories in the broader scheme of things? Where are my people's narratives, poetry, music, culture? Where are they to be found within the curriculum of K through 20 education? This is one of the great contributions of African American studies. It can answer many of those questions, or it can help us pose even better questions. But the fact that first-generation college students were instrumental in establishing African American studies is essentially the key to understanding its continuing importance. African American studies puts college and university campuses in direct contact with broader supporting communities. And it therefore is a form of dialogical knowledge. What I mean by this is that African American studies isn't just me as a professor and affiliate faculty member of African American Studies at UF going out into Gainesville or to Los Angeles or to the South Bronx and telling people what Black Studies is. It's reciprocal. It's me going to the South Bronx or to East Los Angeles or to Gainesville, Florida, and learning from the community their interpretations, their understanding of Black studies. And in the case of me being a historian, of course, I'm most interested in the history of communities. But if I was a literary scholar, if I was an ethnographer, if I was a sociologist, you kind of get my drift by now. We have many different, there are many different disciplines within Black studies. In terms of reimagining the impact of African American studies, I want to close by again reminding us that all over this country, high school students, college students, labor union members, church, synagogue, mosque members are stepping up and holding history workshops, history seminars. And my Black History Month and my Hispanic Heritage Month especially, because I teach both of those wonderful topics, it grew exponentially in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement resurgence in the spring of 2020. And I want to close on this note because I want us to remember the connectivity, the connections between African American studies and the broader popular movement. This is what the founders of our field, again, people like Sylvia Wynter, C.L.R. James, Carter G. Woodson, and others stressed, that you can't just have African American studies on the campus or in the classroom or in the library. African American studies is everywhere. It is in public murals. It's in graffiti. It's in breakdancing. It's in spoken word. And in other words, we don't hide our light under a bushel, to borrow an old biblical metaphor. We go out into communities and we work in communities. I remember having the great privilege to sit down and talk to Cedric Robinson and Carlos Munoz at different points, and I would ask them, you know, to you, what is Black Studies? What I asked Cedric Robinson and to Carlos Munoz, you know, what was Chicano studies originally? What were these incredible fields in their original iterations? And both of them essentially told me the same thing. They said, you weren't doing Black studies in the 60s unless you took it to the prisons, unless you took it to the women's shelters, unless you took it to the labor union halls. In other words, it wasn't good enough to just do Black studies or Latinx studies or Chicano studies in the classroom or in the library or in the seminar room. And so I guess I'll conclude on that note to remind us that when the Black Studies Matter, or when the Black Lives Matter movement really resurged in the spring of 2020, it had a tremendous positive impact on this nation's sense of needing to look in the mirror and learning our true history, learning our true relationships to each other. Again, I wish I could be there with you today. I apologize having to be out of town. But again, thank you to Professor Gordon for organizing the panel, and thank you for your invitation.
I do want to, before we proceed, acknowledge one or two people here. We do have, I didn't tell you where I am, but I hope you know where I am. I'm a graduate from Bethune-Cookman University. It was called BCU then, it was BCC College. Then I went to Harvard for my master's degree and PhD from Michigan State University. I taught at Albany State in Georgia for many years. Then I moved to University of Kansas to develop African American Studies, African Studies, 1970, and I retired in 2004. But I have not really retired. I'm a Nkrumah Distinguished Professor at the University of Ghana for 3 years. I travel around almost everywhere in Africa to do the same thing I'm doing now. The significance of oral history is very critical. And I don't know what to tell you. I'm hoping at the end of this program we can start working with each organization, do some workshops. How do we keep our documents? There are some historical methods of doing that. We will offer that. How do we maintain our history? And where are the areas for repository of our materials? Where can we find them? I met a young lady who is not here. She said, Jake, I got all my materials on my couch. I'm not giving them to you. I said, yes, I've heard that 10,000 times. There's an African proverb. When the elder person in the community dies, your archive dies. Mm-hmm. So your history in your head at home doesn't mean anything after you are gone. So I told the lady, please, tell me what will it cost for me to make copies. I will leave the original for you. She has not responded yet. I say that to say something about how we look at our history. History is powerful. History was used to colonize us. History was used to enslave us. They even published a book, the Negro Bible, in 1808 in England, so we can behave well. Don't be like Jesus, but this is the way we want you to behave. Obey. So history is very powerful. So what we are doing today, this is a laboratory. I said that before two other great speakers for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, ladies. Just a highlight. We are coming back to you to give us detail of your history. That's going to be part of this volume. We're going to have a big volume of the history of black folks in Alachua County. Very, very rich and neglected or distorted or stolen. So I'm going to move on. After that, we're going to pose some general questions for discussion, get the audience involved, engage in that discussion. All of that going to be recorded. So who wants to go first? Rosewood or NAACP?
She said she wanted to be last.
NAACP. Let's see what we can learn from 1909.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Evelyn Fox, and I'm the current president of the Alachua County branch of the NAACP. I think most of you are familiar with this great civil rights organization that was established in 1909. The Alachua County branch was established in 1947 after I've been here 30 years, and after trying to acquire our charter, we finally got it about 5 years ago. So we do have the charter of the Alachua County branch NAACP, and we will be celebrating 75 years this year. And we are very proud of the fact that we are, and we will be having a Founders Day luncheon in July, and we invite all of you to attend. The NAACP is a civil rights organization. We advocate for civil rights of all mankind. Now, we are the NAACP, and that C in there stands for all colors of people. We are not just an African American organization. If you read up on the history of the NAACP, it was founded by blacks and whites coming out of the NAGRA movement. So we're here, we're still fighting. Some of the problems we had back in the 60s, believe it or not, we still have them today in Alachua County in the state of Florida, and in these United States, we're having some of the same type of civil rights problems, which is very, very sad. We've come a long way, but believe me, we have a very, very long way to go. We are not lynched hanging on the tree, but we're lynched otherwise. If you look at the number of young African Americans who were jailed in this county, and it all goes back to the state attorney. They decide the lives of our young black people and older people, so they come up with the sentences. Do you realize there are more African Americans in prisons across the country than there have ever been slaves? Right now, we have more African American young men, in particularly, in prison than there was ever those numbers of slavery. And that is sad. So we are still being lynched, but in a different form. So we invite all of you to join the NAACP as we continue to fight the fight. Right now, our history is under attack by the governor of the state. We have to advocate and let him know that we will not tolerate it. So we invite all of you to join us in this very, very historical and serious fight that we have before us. We meet the fourth Thursday of every month via Zoom. The membership is only $30 a year. And if you wish to become a life membership, civil life membership, it's $750. And I know several of you around the table are life members, including Reverend Carl and Mrs. Lizzie and several others in the room. So together we can make a difference. The Bible says a house divided against itself will not stand. So we invite you to stand with us, and let's work toward making a difference in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And now we go to my sister here, Queen Lizzie.
You got that right. Before I start, I'm going to read you a comment I just received from Pegan Hanrahan. I don't know what's wrong with my throat. Your work is so important, Lizzie Robinson Jenkins. Thank you for continuing it for our community to respect and learn from a painful past. Painful past. That is one thing I want you to remember. And you will understand today why I am not going to talk in details about Rosewood, because it is painful. At 1 p.m. today, 1:30 p.m. today, I have another event. When I speak on Rosewood details, I am on my way home to get in the bed, fetal position, to decompress. It is that painful, y'all. And I do that every time I speak. So I'm not going to tell you about Rosewood details today. But I'm a historian. I'm a graduate from the most influential black university in the world, Florida Memorial University. All right. Why? Because it is the home of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Did you all know that? That is why it is very influential, because Lift Every Voice and Sing is the Negro national anthem. So to me, it's important. My Rosewood aunt graduated from Florida Memorial College. Back then, it was Florida Memorial Industrial Institute when she graduated from college. My name, as I said, I am a historian. My name is Lizzie Polly Robinson Brown Bowman Cotman Coleman Davis Halsey Love McIntyre Sams Jenkins.
Wow. All right now.
And for every last name that I just gave you, I know who those people are. I know my family, okay? And that may not be important to you, but it's important to me. And I'm going to start with this young lady. My aunt was a Rosewood school teacher. She was violently gang raped by the KKK. Approximately 300 to 500 KKK members from Gainesville to Sumner. They traveled because on December 31, 1922, downtown Gainesville hosted a KKK rally. So when the trouble started in Sumner, Fannie Taylor's husband called Gainesville law officers and invited them down. My uncle was brutally beaten also, her husband. My aunt, Matilda Gussie Brown Carrier, was the Rosewood school teacher. Her husband was also beaten almost to death, bloody. Before they decided to allow him life, one of them said, one of the 500 said, or some of the 500, well, he's damn near dead. Let's kill him. The Sheriff Walker drove up at the right time and said, no, throw him in the car and I will finish him off. They threw him in the car. Guess what the sheriff did? Sheriff Walker brought my uncle to Gainesville, told Sheriff P.J. Ramsey, put him in jail. You better not tell the KKK he is here. He told the trustees in the jail, now you all go out and find the doctors and bring them in. Find those 2 black doctors, Negro doctors, but you know they didn't call them Negro, to bring into this jail and take care of Aaron. And guess who the doctors were? Dr. Parker. Is Dr. Parker related to anybody in this at this table?
He's my grandfather.
Really? I knew that. But anyway, the other doctor was Dr. Eyre. They were the 2 black doctors in Alachua County, and they came in with a nurse. I don't know her name, and I don't know Vivian, if you may know back then.
Well, Miss Florence Woods was that era, but I don't know.
Okay, maybe Mrs. Florence Woods. Okay, but anyway, they came in, they took care of Aaron. Okay, and the reason I'm jumping about and just telling this my way is because I don't want all of the pressure on me. But I want you to know this. My mom wrote a song. The most important song, verse in this particular song says this: the sheriff and the store owner worked around the clock, informed the train conductors just when and where to stop, pick up the men, women, and children who were hiding out, and bring them to Archer, Florida, traveling the same old route. The first stop was at Archer, Florida. Why? Because my aunt lived in Archer, Florida. People don't want to participate, some of them in Alachua County, because they say, well, Rosewood happened in Levy County. It happened in Levy County, but my aunt was from Archer, Alachua County. There were men moved from Archer and Alachua County, lived in shotgun houses in Sumner, and worked at the Sumner sawmill with James Taylor. So Alachua contributed a lot to Levy County. And plus, at one time, Alachua was part of Levy County. Okay, so I'm talking from a different perspective, and I want Carol to know I'm talking about the people here that touch my heart with your reports. Carol, my aunt also attended Union Academy, which later became A. Quinn Jones, and then Lincoln. I graduated from Lincoln, but as Sister Vivian, nope, I got it wrong?
Yeah, it didn't go A. Quinn Jones because it wasn't named after him when he started. No. It was Lincoln, Lincoln, then A. Quinn.
The reason I said A. Quinn because she works there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to incorporate us. Yes. Okay. But if I'm wrong, honey, please correct me. I know you're the second smartest person at this table. Okay, and Evelyn, NAACP? Yeah. I was 10 years old when I joined the NAACP. Okay? I am now a civil life member. As a result of me joining at 10 years old, my dad and mom were both members of the NAACP. They instilled in us the importance of the NAACP. And every one of their kids and grandkids before my mom died, she taught them, you must vote. And today I have 42 nephews, 39 nieces, they all vote, not the babies now. Those that are voting age, they vote. They are afraid not to vote because my husband works at the poll, and they know that, that John is going to say so-and-so didn't come in today. So they call me and say, Auntie, I need to vote, tell me who. I say to them, vote. But we want to know. I said, it doesn't matter, just make sure you get your name on that list. And I'm to you, my dear cousin, Nix. I just asked him, is Frederica your mom? He said, yes. I know him because, as I said, my grandfather was born in Rochelle. Now, before my great-grandfather came from Orangeburg, South Carolina, but not before he married Eliza Bowman. Bowman, South Carolina, she came from. Listen, Bowman, South Carolina, her name was Bowman. What does that tell you? There is some white among the crowd. So we talk about slave owners. My grandfather, Wesley Brown, was a slave owner because he had family members on both sides that he brought from South Carolina, blacks and the whites. And the blacks and the white family members' blood, when they were leaving South Carolina and on their way to Rochelle, they had to fight all the way to keep the real white slave owners from capturing the blacks in that clan. So I have some story. I want you also to know you need to call me because I am so proud you are still a black farmer and still own your property. My dad bought lots of property when he was younger and said, y'all better not sell my property ever. I want to say to him, now you come back and pay this taxes on it. We still have that property. And a young man called me a month or two ago. He is a farmer. I will put you in touch with him. He is looking for you and people like you. I don't know if anybody else in Alachua County does what you do. I know Alachua out there, they have farmers out there in Brooker and other places out there. Talk to me. And I want you to know, Rhonda, I'm not going to leave you out. I appreciate so much what you are doing, and I want you to help me. I have a podcast. I want you to help me select some children. Okay, what are y'all laughing at? I want you to help me select some children to go on my podcast. Okay, I have a 10-year-old nephew that will be my guest next week. Okay, and I want you, and I'm going to invite you and all of you all to be guests on my podcast so we can save our children, so we can save our history, so we can say no to our governor. He will not ban Black history. Okay, I just want you all to know that I'm going to be doing Lindy Hop in my Rosewood upcoming event, a Lindy Hop is like the swing they did in Rosewood. Everybody was not churchgoers, or they did go to church, but they had fun too. They had a juke joint there. I am going to perform the Lindy Hop coming up soon. I want you all to know that I was in Miami last week. There were 59 massacres presented that started in the 1500s. I want to close with this. There is, FIU did an elegy to Rosewood, which was an exhibit of Rosewood and my artifacts, which has gone, I thought, national. And I was talking to a friend out of New York, and I was telling her about the elegy. She said, oh, I know all about the elegy of Rosewood. I just saw it. And she said, no, it's more than national. It is international. Go to my website, my Facebook, and you can see it and follow me. Elegy to Rosewood. They have done an excellent job. FIU out of Miami. I appreciate everything you all have done and said. I just can't talk about the details of Rosewood, but I did tell you enough. And let me tell you about my mom. My mother, my historian, told me the story 30 years ago and told me what I was going to do. You are going to research, preserve, and keep this history alive. I said, Mom, I don't want to do it. I was angry. I didn't want it because I knew the pain. I'm still angry. But today it's like a happy angry, or a whatever kind of anger. I don't know what people call it. I'm pleased because I'm doing what I'm doing and have done to get the message out, but it's so painful. Thank you very much. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lizzie. Queen Lizzie, by the way, she's a life member of the Historical Society. Give her another good hand, please. Before we got time before lunch for the audience participation. Look at the program. There are issues I want the roundtable to address. But before we do that, I want to recognize people who are really powerful, who aspire me to do these things, members of our board of directors for the Historical Society. Dr. Agnes, can you stand up? So, Dr. Davis, can you stand up, please? Barbara, can you stand up, please? Member of our board, the doctor. And Phyllis, we just want to thank you all for support for the board, for this Historical Society. It's new, it's non-profit. We got a long way to go. Thank you, thank you. You may now have your seat, Barbara. Okay, now, there are a couple of issues here, 3 of them at least. Let me see how I can phrase them so that we give the audience opportunity to tell their own history if they want to make any kind of contribution. Biography is very important. I have students who are working on different key biographies. People just discovered Gibbs, who was the first black Secretary of State in the history of Florida. Nobody says anything about it. But we are digging out all these stories. They are there. We don't allow them to be buried. From your presentation, what lessons have you learned? And how do we attempt to reimagine the future of black folks in Alachua County? That's the question. What lessons have you learned? How do we move forward? Anybody want to start?
Well, from what I have learned is that there is a lot of work to be done. What I'm encouraged by is that there are people who are willing to do the work. I think you need to question, validate, and find ways of making sure you can add dates where possible, instances, names, whatever you can. Every family has history. And I think any way that we can catalog that, get oral histories of your families if you can, but certainly what I've learned and the things that we do at the museum is to try to question what comes in to validate it, to make sure we are giving true and actual history.
Talking about family history, there's a young lady that I met a few years ago. She wrote a book. Her name is Ashley McLean. It's fantastic. It's about what? About 500 pages, documenting her family history. right here in this community. I wanted her to come out and present, but she has a conflict to really bring the book so you can see it. So that can be done. We can start our history with our family, and that's what happens. We are collecting data on black neighborhoods throughout the whole Alachua County, the institutions, the businesses. All these things are what we are working on. We are also now looking at literature on the African-American experience in Alachua County, a review of literature, what has been written about us, and how was it written. It is going to be an annotated bibliography that we are working on. I don't know when it's going to be out, but we are there. There are not too many, okay? Not too many. So we are looking into American history, into the history of Florida. That's why I really like the brother's book, A History of Florida Through Black Eyes. It's on the table. Take a look at it. He was supposed to be our speaker. We're going to send his speech in which he has told his own story. In that speech, what really fascinates me about Dunn's work. This is the man who went to the Navy, suffered, did everything. And he came back, I want to do a PhD, and he wanted to go to his flagship university, University of Florida. 1966, he got a letter. You can imagine what the letter said. We don't admit Negroes. But if you can go to any other university in America, we will pay your fees. And he went to Tennessee, where he got his PhD. That's just one little story. There are many stories like this all over. Okay? So who else wants to answer the question? What have you learned?
I'll just say...
There you go. We want to put it on the table.
I would just say that I see my place right now as the middle person between older generations and the new generation. And as I look at my family, I was able to spend a lot of time with cousin Magnolia, my uncle Nathaniel Hall, who also lived to be 100. We have another centurion out in the Rochelle area. I've learned so much from them. And I see my role right now is being able to act as that middle person to make sure that next generation understands that they're living on the shoulders of other people. My farm acts as a symbol of our legacy. I spent a lot of time there. I have great memories there. And when we have our family reunion, I make sure that all the kids come out, see the farm as a living monument of our family. So I see my role right now as that person that makes that transition from the older generation to the next generation. And lessons learned, it's not going to be easy. We talked about struggles in NAACP. A lot of things haven't changed. We just got different mechanisms now that show the racism and that show the inequality. And we have to let our children know that the race is not over yet. We just have different weapons and we have different ways to fight, but we still got to be vigilant, and we got to know our history. We got to know that you did not just start now, that your history is the thing, that your foundation that's going to make you a better person. And I want to reimagine Alachua County as being a place of equity, a place where everyone is guaranteed success. We can give each other what we need so that everybody in Alachua County can achieve a successful life. Both, not just the farmers, but the students. I work in Alachua County schools, and I can tell you, it's not equal. It's not equal on the east side of Gainesville. It is on the northwest side of Gainesville. So we want that equity where we can reimagine Alachua County as being a place that produces equalness for everybody.
Thank you. The Alachua County has what we call Alachua County Historical Commission. There are 3 of us here today. I want to recognize the other 2 are here. One in the audience. Mel, can you stand up, please? You? Yeah. Aren't you a member of the Historical Commission? You, a member of the Historical Commission. So you can talk with these people. We serve together. It's my first year in the commission. So there is Alachua County Historical Commission.
There's also Gainesville.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes. They do too, yes. Okay. Who else want to tackle the question before I go to the audience?
It's been said.
Is there anybody in the audience who wants to make a personal contribution? Either you are a member of organization, a former member, or your own story, which will contribute to understanding the Black experience in Alachua County. Yes, yeah.
Well, I wanted to mention that, as was said before, the Pleasant Street Historic Society was founded in 1984, and I was asked to be a founding member. And next year, next March, will be the 40th anniversary, and I think that would be a great thing to have a gala and a discussion of the reason for the organization and all the things that have been accomplished in 40 years. So that's a special anniversary. Other people have talked about their 75th anniversary, their 30th anniversary, and Pleasant Street will be having its 40th anniversary. I just wanted to let everybody know about that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh.
I do think preserving history is important, so much so that we have just recognized the Spring Hill community where the Cotton Club Museum sits, and we're going to partner with the Samuel Oral History Program to gather histories of all the Spring Hill neighborhood members we can find, those who are still there and those who have moved away. So that will be something we start the next semester. When we listen to the stories that we heard today about the lynchings, these are stories that are over and over and over the same story. My dad fits that image of the person who was almost lynched in Trenton, Florida. But I bet you can find as many families as you can think of who had someone who was almost lynched, say by a white person. I've taken my grandchildren back to Trenton, Florida, where I was. I started school in a one-room schoolhouse. There's still a one-room schoolhouse on the yard of the Liberty Hill Church. We're trying to get stuff done there to try to preserve that. But the life I led, what I had to go through to get into the University of Florida, I just became a 50-year Grand Guard graduate of the University of Florida. I couldn't get in because of segregation. I was married and 2 children, 6 and 10, before I could Santa Fe Open Integrated. I could go to work all night and go to school during the day, and that's how I get it. But those stories, all of us have them. And let me say this to the white folks. I always have to point out the white folks when I'm here. And that is, you have a story too. And it's time now for the white people to start telling their stories. I want to know what your grandpa told you and what your grandmama told you, and why can't we all talk about this at the level that we all bring something to the table? So I need to know, and I told my friends one time, when I was walking past Bill Hawks to go all the way across town to Lincoln, and you were looking out the window at me in the rain, I want to know where you were thinking. I also we need to get to the point where black people don't have to explain to white people why white people treated us the way they did. They had that history in their family. Ask somebody in your family if they didn't tell you what it was, and then let's talk about it, because we didn't do it. History, you don't have to explain. You don't have to feel bad about it. It is history.
Thank you. Just identify yourself.
I'm Lizzie Robinson Jenkins, and first I want to just thank Vivian for giving me courage to say what I need to say. As I speak, I am being targeted or talked about as Liz said this about white men. Okay? What I said about white men is true. My dad was scared to death of white men all of his life. He walked to work 7 miles each day. He walked the back way, and I know black folks know what I'm talking about when I said back way. He could not be seen, because had he been seen by white men, lynching. My dad prayed every night, and he used the word lynching. He didn't want to be lynched because he owned property, and that was one way white men would lynch you, to take your property. My mother was the family's protector. Mom carried 24 or 38 in her bosom, switchblade in her pocket to protect my dad. My dad was the man, but my mom was the emancipator. And I remember as a kid, I heard that switchblade go click. Didn't know what in the world it was until I was older. Thank you for giving me the courage to say what I just said. And I know everybody out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. So if I say something negative about white men, it's true. My great-grandmother walked from Parchment, Mississippi to Archer, Florida. Took her 6 months. She was abused, humiliated all the way. So what I say is true. That's enough.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask our host to just close for us, I'm asking myself the question, where do we go from here? This is our first roundtable. This is just the beginning. We have some ideas. We're going to follow through with each of you. How do you begin to keep your records so that we can preserve them and write about them and tell the story? That's one thing I hope we can do when we complete all the research we are doing. The other thing is collaboration. Every February, Lord, I have to eat so much so I can go to all kinds of programs. That was not the dream of Kataji Woodson.
Absolutely.
In 1926, when he said, let's celebrate Black history, it was called Negro History there, 1 week. It didn't mean that's the only week you study black folks.
That's right.
He meant that was the day you bring in everything I've been doing the rest of the months and have an exhibition to demonstrate our contribution, the development of the global North and America. So now we move it now into 1 month. Everybody say, why is it 1 month? No, 1 month is just celebration time.
That's it. That is it.
There's Black history every day, the rest, the whole month.
Yes.
If you look at calendars now, there are things you can do every day for 3 or something days in a way. So we are hoping that there will be some kind of, I'm going to speak now to the city manager folks. There's an idea of interagency organization. An interagency that brings these folks together every now and then to communicate, because you all share the same value, the same goal. There's no room for competition, there's no room for, but there's room for collaboration.
Yes.
So an interagency organization can really be something to think about on a city level or on a county level, brother.
All right.
Okay, so all these organizations can meet and start sharing. And together you can even generate big grants to do big things. The Mellon Foundation now is headed by a black woman, and the list goes on. So we have power to do something that is actually beneficial to the entire world, not just America. Our history is more than just America. America is the world. We all came from everywhere at different times, some by boat, some by air, some by sea, whatever. But we are all in the same boat. We built this place. So we need some collaboration, not fighting, coordination, cooperation, according to 3 C's. So if we can form an interagency, I think that would be very useful. For us, our organization is full of a lot of historians and educators. That's why we are a historical society, to help to document our history, your history, the history of folks in this part of the state. So that's what I think is our next step. We do have some evaluation forms before we go and have lunch or refreshment. But Carol, can you just say something as our host? And we really want to thank you also for making this facility, this historical facility, for us to meet. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to host. As I listen and sit and listen to a room full of wisdom, I'm definitely learning and taking it in. And it just pressed upon me the importance of why we need cultural facilities so that we can constantly have the conversations and the dialogue. So I'm really happy and proud of the city of Gainesville for making this facility as well as our other cultural facilities available, so that you'll have a place to come and fight it out or share the stories and just have a think tank. The other thing is the city of Gainesville also invests in the Journey to Juneteenth each month. So we work with Ms. Filer to help organize that. I don't know if you've noticed, but on the city of Gainesville's website, throughout the month, which is something they've never done, throughout the month of February, we've tried to be intentional in recognizing known African-American figures as well as unknown African-American figures. We have a cemetery which is called Evergreen. We do, and historically, African-Americans were not buried there. They had a cemetery next door, which is, I think, Pine Grove, but Evergreen is owned by the city of Gainesville, so we're trying to honor those African-Americans that are there. So all I want to just say is that the city, we are committed to helping you achieve your goals. We have several beautiful facilities, including the A. Quinn Jones Museum that is available to you, and our Office of Equity and Diversity and Inclusion with our charter officer, Zariah Foston, is working to really do some great things for the city of Gainesville. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge, and I definitely just know that these buildings are available for you if you need them. Thank you.
Jay, Dr. Jay, you mentioned email needed.
Yes.
I noticed the sign up is only name. So I started this in order to get the presentations, that from Dr. Ortiz and Dr. Dunn. So I've got it from the people behind me. Now we need it from all of you at the table. I'll pass it.
I need to say that Nkwanda John wanted to let you know that she was so sorry she couldn't be here, but that the Cultural Arts Coalition will be sponsoring this annual Fifth Avenue Festival, April the 29th and April the 30th. And I also wanted to let you know that the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, as a part of the Journey to Juneteenth, we'll have a huge May 20th event this year. We're going to have a walk from Depot Park. We're going to have a stage outside. We're going to actually plant, I have crosses to commemorate the Union soldiers, African soldiers who were in the Union Army who fought their freedom. We're going to make it big because May 20th is big in Gainesville. We're going to cooperate, and then on June 19th, we have the June 16th. It's a Friday. Ms. Evelyn Fox and Dr. Barbara are both on the board of the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center. So go to our website, stay involved, and we're trying to do it. Thank you.
I have one announcement. I'll wait till they stop talking. I'm a teacher after y'all stop talking.
Last announcement.
Thank you. Just want to announce next weekend we open a show called Cadillac Crew, and it's about a group of civil rights workers who formed these Cadillac crews who were historical. They traveled in a pack of 4, and our show opens next Friday at 8:00 p.m. at the Star Center.
All right.
Thank you so much. Time for refreshments. Yeah.
That's what you get for staying to the end.
Exactly.